Everything's ready to go. Right, tricky question to start off with, Paul. What's your name?
Paul. And I'd like to start by acknowledging not only the original owners of this resource, land, we're meeting on today and discussing, but also the people over the years that have helped put this resource together. So I thank everyone for the opportunity, and I acknowledge and respect that opportunity as well.
Okay, very good. So Paulo or Paul?
Paulo's fine, but Paul as well, no worries. I get lots of stuff.
Right, Paulo. And you've lived in here for quite some time. You were here before I got here.
Yeah.
In late 89. How long have you been here?
10 years.
10 years?
No, I mean, I beat you by 10 years.
Okay.
I came down with a friend in 79 when he bought a block, which was now 2 blocks away from me, and he was building a mud brick house.
Yep.
And sort of like alternative lifestyler.
Yep.
And I had a business in Perth. It's a cafe on the beach sort of thing. And it was hard work, 13 hours a day, 7 days a week for 7 months of the year, and then 5 months holidays. But it was time in the America's Cup, well, before the America's Cup. But then I bought my block of land in 82, but long story up till that stage as well. But yeah, 79 I fell in love.
We'll get back to the Perth days, I'm sure, eventually.
Okay. Yeah.
But what, so had you been down here before?
I
visited at school and then decided, oh no, this is nice.
In fact, I came down with Life Unit campaign because I used to play volleyball as a kid I was a youth in Perth, and in my younger days I could jump, even though I'm not very tall, but I could jump really high, and I love volleyball. And when I stuffed up my legs, I got a sort of gig with the Department of Youth, Sport and Recreation. Sorry to go back to Perth again, but I've got to go back. And a mate that went to school with me knew that I'd played volleyball, and I'd played for the state for a few years, and I was quality, but I was sort of semi-retiring because I couldn't jump anymore. But he offered me a job to set up Life Unit campaign with beach volleyball, and start beach volleyball in sort of 1978 this was, and 79, and so I was driving around the beaches and civic centres and places around the place, and setting up all sorts of games and beach volleyball. You know, we get bobcat in and a truckload of stands and these net holders that I'd made and nets and set up and play games. And one place we came to was Manjimup, Fonty's Pool. And I just, was just astounded by the white sticks, the majesty of them, and the aura of walking through the bush sort of thing. I was only in my mid-20s then, or early 20s, and I always sort of had a really, that had a profound impact on me. I'd already sort of travelled to Asia a couple of times, and been around Australia and up north and stuff, and and he was unreal. And then the weather got bad, and the West Australian government brought in the Soils and Land Conservation Act of 1979, I think, which prevented farmers from clearing, and lots of upheavals in lifestyles because people realised that maybe water's running out or it's getting hotter. And
or both.
Or both, yeah. Or our actions are accelerating the process, or the deterioration of what we've got, sort of thing, our natural resource. And so I came down with my mate who bought land down here, and helped him build his mud brick house, and just fell in love with the lifestyle. In fact, no contact, no telephone, AM radio, scratchy, 7:38 AM, and miles away from anywhere, And the block of land come up next door, sort of thing, quite cheap for 100 acres. I thought back then, I can say, 40 grand for 100 acres or 110 acres. and of bush, and they were giving it away then, just a block over the road just before 1979 shut down. That gone for $5,000 for 500 acres. That was a CP block, and that was what the government was giving up until 1979 when the Soils and Conservation Act came in. Because before that, they were, promoting agriculture and the intensification of agriculture in the area, and I've always been sort of into that as well, but with sort of reins on the scientists and the people that are, I call them the exploiters, but I'm an exploiter as well. We're all exploiters, We've got to exploit natural resources to live.
We all consume something.
Yeah, that's right, and even air and water. Anyway, I've always, known that water is more than 65% of our body, yes, and it's a really important thing, and I've just watched it deteriorate from, once again, getting back to Perth. My Swan River, it was my playground, opposite the Raffles Hotel, I'm a Como boy sort of thing, and I watched the Kwinana Freeway get built sort of thing,
Yeah.
Canning Bridge and shell tracks and fishing under Canning Bridge and getting fresh prawns out of the river, and then it just, suddenly sort of within 2 or 3 years in my early teens, sort of the natural environment of my part of the Swan River estuary changed, to mainly to jellyfish and Portuguese man of war and the odd tailor, but heaps of blowies and you're lucky to get a herring up that far up the river. But anyway, and I watched that sort of deteriorate, in front of my eyes, my playground where I could go with my little brother as a 9-year-old and he was a 7-year-old, and we'd pull a prawn net just north of Canning Bridge where the Como Sea Scouts is, and get a half a bucket of just really fresh, beautiful river prawns. And that was gone, bang, And I really felt that and observed that, as a teenager, what the fuck's going on here,
Yeah.
And but I didn't want to blame anyone, I just wanted to know what was going on, I really never, I've only blamed myself, but I never really blamed anyone, but I'm not scared of asking questions, and trying to sort of, help people, especially audit their water use, and then I come down here and I was, what I consider now a sort of a smart ass, ideological, greenie zealot sort of thing, that knew everything, and I wish I had a sort of just sat in the bush, or I lived in a tent for 3 months while we built a shed that I lived in for a sort of a year and a half, coming and going from Perth still as I was getting rid of my business, and then I spent a year doing the horse rides at Carry Valley. That's another story.
But you wouldn't be who you were if you didn't do what you did, and
everyone's the same.
Yeah. You did get into, like, being a counsellor, for instance. That showed a bit of dedication to want to try and make a difference, because there's probably a few hours in doing that, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a big involvement, there's a big commitment, there's a big sort of opportunity to be proud of the service you can give to a community that you live in, sort of thing, I don't want to sound selfish or anything, but, and I don't want to, I'm not doing it for a legacy or anything, but, helping the school and helping kids' sports in a community you live in is really good sort of thing, And when my kids were at school, I was always into it for sure. But now it's changed a bit. But, I got into horses when I first came here, and I had a bit of cash, so I sort of just rode around on my horses for 4 years and helped my mates, met other mates, or people I'd known from Perth that had bought here as well and wanted a sort of alternate lifestyle, as they call it. And I just explored so much on horseback and saw so many incredible things that no one else would have seen. I'm so fortunate to have had that time, to have to hassle my dog and to spit out the echidna he'd pulled out of the bush for me, and he did, and the echidna would roll up, and he'd, and because my dogs have always been well trained, but I don't see those things now much because I don't ride horses.
There wouldn't be many people who have seen an echidna full stop, especially not down this way.
Yeah.
South Australia, maybe.
And it was within a kilometre, probably 500 metres of this spot.
Oh, right.
Where there's echidnas still living, actually.
Crikey.
There you go. Yep. But keep that quiet anyway. And also being able to, be self-subsistent, not have to go on the dole like, a lot of poor buggers do, because I'd worked hard, for those years in the kiosk, and also the America's Cup came up, and I sort of got out of the kiosk at the time, the America's Cup. And
window tinting?
That was in the early 70s, yeah. Cool at window tinting, yeah. That's another big story. I set up franchises in Port Hedland and Karratha and Kununurra, and then went to Darwin, and me and Steve were in Darwin in sort of 1976, a year and a half after Tracy, and it was still, there's still suburbs wreckage sort of thing. It was incredible, but yeah, that was real adventure days then.
So you made enough money in Perth and surrounds and about to come down here with and buy that block?
Yeah, yep.
You bought it outright,
yep.
I suppose, yeah.
Yep.
Horses, and you would have watched in that time, just being here, the rivers drying up a bit.
Without a doubt, yeah. I noticed it on my property, for example, the bullich, the Eucalyptus megacarpa, because they're supposed to have had the biggest seeds, but it's long been proved that they don't have the biggest seeds of the eucalypt. I was only told the other day by my good friend Ian Rankin. Anyway, I've noticed them over the last probably 5 years, 6 years, the bullich that grow sort of around the creek line, and I've got a sort of we call a winter creek on my property that comes from Wheatley Coast Road and heads off sort of north to the, eventually goes into the Domba Cup actually. Anyway, that's another story, hydrology. And all those bullich that are used to having their roots submerged for maybe up to 3 months of the year in really wet conditions, I mean not in water flowing past them, but really wet conditions, are all suffering. They're all dying, not dying, well, most of them are dying, yeah. But some are struggling and surviving, but the further away from the creek line, they're all dead at my place. And really good firewood too. People should value other eucalypt species more than they do and just hunt the jarrah all the time,
If it fits in, I burn it.
Me too.
Your hydrology is something. Actually, no, we'll go back to you. We'll get back to hydrology, but I do want to ask you about where a good bore would be in Northcliffe.
Well, my block has a watershed on it, which is really incredible sort of thing, So one water goes one way, so a bit of water goes in the garden, a bit of water goes into the Domba Cup, and a little trickle goes into the mirror.
Does that mean it's on like a hill?
Yeah, well, it's sort of on a knoll in a swamp really, because Northcliffe it's all swampy sort of thing with a bit of granite, gravel outcrops here and there beside the Gardner River catchment, and we don't really get any height until you sort of get up to Double Bridges Hills, or Domba Cup, and going towards Pemberton, but we're just coastal heathland flat.
So I will ask you, where do you think a good place for a town bore would be if we had to have one here?
Well, I'll start by I don't agree with bores because groundwater extraction, and most of the groundwater extraction currently is unregulated in Western Australia. And I used to be on a ministerial committee for about nearly 15 years, the Warren Donnelly Water Advisory Committee, that allocates extraction licence and take permits that I really didn't agree with, because we don't know how the whole system works yet. And to say, it's keep filling up, no worries, it's okay, is not okay, because I know of instances where many times farmers' bores have failed and they just stick another hole in it and start pumping from another depth or another little creek line, subterranean creek line. And once again, I don't want to blame anyone, especially farmers, but Water Corporation, when I was on that committee, applied for a licence to take, I think, 25 gigs a year for household consumption for Northcliffe, Pemberton, Clinton and Powgarup, I think, or something. Well, maybe, I think there was 4 or 5 towns, when I was on this committee. And they applied for it and they got knocked back because, the Yarragadee is, we want to save it, And at the same time, BHP got ticked off for a 25 giga licence to extract water from the exact same bore at Yarragadee for dust suppression on their mines in Boddington.
Okay.
Unreal, So that's when I got a bit sort of edgy stuff,
If it's not going to come from a bore from here, it'll come from a bore in Pemberton, Big Brook Dam, Manjimup, Scabby Gully, and piped over from Nannup. So it's got to come from somewhere, though.
Well, Northcliffe's a high rainfall area, Damon, and we still have the cheapest, best opportunity, and is that surface water collection. There's mega runoff, and that's why they came down here in the irrigation purposes, because they could, in those days, they could put in irrigation dams, and people didn't worry about the impact on the environment. They more or less thought about the outcome that they desired, Like, in the early days, I bloody drove through my place with a couple of old-timer locals and wanted to show off the little track I'd put in through the bit of Jarrah and Carry Bush, to the tent side or the house shed side I was building, and these two guys, one of them said, "Oh, crikey, Paul, there's a bit of gravel here, isn't there?" And he was looking at the sort of the trees that he knew that gravel resource would be underneath. So push the trees out of the way and sell the gravel or use the gravel. And these days, it costs a lot more to do any natural resource exploitation because of, hey, hang on a minute, what the impact's going to be of doing that. And that's good, because when I first came here, and smart-ass little greenie hydrological, I'm going to put this track through my forest to my place. Well, I actually, by doing that, I introduced dieback to a bit of Jarrah on my bush, on my property, Luckily, it's sort of downstream, so it's not affecting all the Jarrah, but,
Do you think you're pretty sure it was you?
I've got a lifetime supply of firewood. And I'm not 100% sure, but I'd be 99% sure. I put my hand up, I'm guilty, because I put that track through the bush, with my tractor and driven up and down, and maybe a calm vehicle or a forest department vehicle might have come in here after going through the forest with dieback and introduced it, but still, by putting that access track through the bush, I impacted on the ecosystem, And everyone should consider that first, some sort of do a matrix like we do in the old land care groups,
What's the big picture?
Well, benefit, and, private benefit and public benefit, and then, the positives and the negatives for private and the positive and the negatives for public, and weigh it up, and then fight over the outcomes. And sometimes, you've got to live with not really agreeing with the outcomes, and then either you quit that committee or you keep
You
fighting.
would have been on a few committees in your time here. I know you're quite famously on the Tourist Bureau one, spending a lot of time there, but just rattle off a few that you have been on.
The Tally Centre and the CRC Management Committee now, which I consider one of the best committees in Northcliffe that I've ever been on. And the museum, the Northcliffe Pioneer Museum Committee, I'm still on.
Yep.
But I was involved in, setting up the committee structure for the Bushfire Brigade with the help of the Shire, with the big boot. And And then I was on council for 4 terms over sort of like 14, 15 years. And I've been on the town hall committee, the cemetery committee, the retirement village committee, the water advisory committee, which was a big committee, and then the Manjimup LCDC that morphed into the Southern Forest Land Care, and I was on chairman of that for over 25 years.
LCDC, what does that stand for?
Local Conservation, Land Conservation District Committee. Mm-hmm. So Manjimup LCDC is Manjimup Land Conservation District Committee, and that was a part of the Soils and Conservation Act of 1979. The Commissioner of Soils and Lands at the time had the legal right and obligation to protect lands. Now, never been done before. There's new legislation. The old legislation, the Rights in Irrigation Act of 1903, was sort of, you want water, go for your life, And at the same time, you can have, 2,000 acres of land to bloody use that water on and grow whatever you want, and beef and, I'm not blaming them. They, people had the attitude then of exploiting the natural resources for gain.
It was encouraged.
A lot of times personal gain, but also, it was encouraged by governments to set up a community structure sort of thing, But I realised in my teenage years that we were selling out Western Australia big time, and I've, got a reputation of the meetings I've sometimes been to of watch out for Paulo because he's going to ask the sticky questions, And I'm scared to ask questions, Stupid questions are easier to answer than stupid mistakes, So I'll always put up to be ask the stupid questions, and I still think in this day and age, with regards to natural resource exploitation, more money is spent on spin doctors and lawyers and bullshit artists, like Chevron is right at the top of the list, all through the oil companies, right down to the bloody clothing manufacturers or something. They all spend more on bullshitting about how they're rooting the ecosystem when and they know they're doing it, when they should be really spending that money on educating people to not do what we do, because you've still got to have industry, you've still got to have people that make clothes, produce food, fix up roads, give you water, take your shit away, give you power, So we've got a lot of things to sort of
balance,
to exploitation levels, but. Another total subject is, natural resource exploitation tax or fund or trust, instead of a tax, And my cousin was a farmer with the wheat belt, really good producing area, and he'd spend up to $1.5–2 million putting in crops and lose the lot or make, $5 to $8 million. And so it's almost like a gamble sort of thing. But when he lost, he lost, the bank screw him a bit sort of thing, and he doesn't buy a new Land Cruiser or a new header or whatever. When he makes some money, he bloody needs to go to hospital for counselling because he's so worried about how much tax he's going to pay, because he's made a killing out of natural resources because it's been a really good year, it's been a really good growing season, and he should be able to put that money in some sort of trust that he can draw from when he has a bad year, or that also the benefits of that trust go to all of Australians, especially health and education, and I'm not just talking about farmers, especially miners, obviously they always look at miners, but fishermen, anyone that makes a killing out of natural resources, when they make a killing, instead of shitting yourself about having to pay big tax, think about your contribution to the betterment of where you live because of that killing that you've made that day, sort of thing, And
people should think that way about tax more often. You are helping to purchase a bit of a school, a bit of a road, a bit of a
Exactly, yeah.
stuff that we need.
Well,
It's evil. Tax is evil.
Yeah.
No, it's not evil. It's how things get done from a government point of view. Anyway.
Yeah, but also the big earners, the way that laws are set up are just completely out of control. You know, they don't pay any tax at all. You know, and they're just laughing. You know, but they're so, you know, put their hands up on the biggest philanthropist in the world because prospecting gives, you know, millions and millions of dollars to this community and that community, and they do as well. But they can afford to when they bloody make $120 million a week on royalties. You know, It's just obscene that people make that so much money.
Now, he was good. Robert Taubman was good.
Was
Who knew
great.
there was, like, he could tell 8 different types of clover.
Shit. Well, I thought I was smart. I know 4. I mean, I know, you know, the two types of local, used to call them Manju grass, Lotus minor and Lotus major.
Oh, yeah.
When I first come to town, yeah, and you could even buy the seeds off a guy at Jardee, because we used to buy it, some guy Rose, Eddie Rose, I think, at Jardee. Because when I came down here, you know, once again, you know, with my 4 years of bloody riding horses around, I also, you know, probably supported these farmers in buying truckloads of hay and feed from the stock feeds. Wayne Muir used to have it then, you know, he's a good operator, but Troy's a good operator now as well, you know. And
Have you ever been on the World of Wilderness, the Gary Muir Nornlup?
yeah,
Tour?
really early tour, but a tour with the council, the Shire Council when he first set it up, and so it was sort of more a tour for the councillors instead of tourists or visitors without sort of a bit of knowledge already. So he would have given, you know, he would have been. But I've been at other events when Gary Muir has given his presentations. He's a cracker, you know. He's
Everyone
right.
says he's fantastic. I haven't been on one, and I've heard just positive reports from everyone.
Yeah, he's just right out there, Gary. You know, he's so positive. You know, he's almost like, what do you call it? Bloody, I shouldn't say, you know, ADHD or something. but most probably bloody politicians and bloody presentations on, you know, the 1% Club or whatever else. I see ads on TV for those stupid reality TV shows. And, you know, tourists go for that sort of thing, you know, because, you know, when I, after 4 years of riding my horses around and, you know, and cruising down, you know.
And you'd do trail rides and people would pay you to go on them?
Yeah, well, after 4 years of it, then, you know, the bank manager tapped me on the back and said, hey, Paul, you know, you've got to start putting money in and not taking it out. Oh, shit, I've got to work. I've got to make money. And, so I, you know, advertised trail rides, but also got a job with a really good mate, Ross Walker from Quinnanup, you know, he taught me a lot. I already knew a bit about building from my father, you know, he was a really good dad. But and Ross has always wanted me to help him sort of thing because he helped me on the build of my initial shed in the early days, you know. He was one of the, you know, local lads like we all were when I first met him. And Quinny Tavern days, you know, and Quinny tennis courts, you know, or the Upper Warren tennis courts on Friday night, they were a legend, you know. For those years, yeah, barbecues and bloody games going on, right? Anyway, so I worked for him for a bit. And where are we going with this?
Well, we'll try and centralise it around Northcliffe. Quinny's close enough. That's our bloody closest neighbour, probably.
Yeah. Oh well, yeah. I was working with Ross, but I was also sort of developing my sideline, you know, where I could get paid to go for a ride, you know, because I loved horses, and, you know, and I went out with Frank Ogil for, you know, a couple of years, you know, when I was first down here. I had money, you know, I had time, you know, it was easy to drive to his place and manage him up and go out for a day's farrowing with him or breaking horses in or whatever, you know. It was such a good experience, and they were really good times. And then an old mate from the school I went to in Perth, you know, and once again a school contact, he came down and he owned Carry Valley Resort, or his company had just bought Carry Valley Resort, Western Resorts Corporation, and he and his wife, Miss Australia, Debbie Hill, Yes, wanted to go for a horse ride, and they heard about me. Hey, Owens here, remember? Yeah, okay. And so we went on Saturday afternoon horse ride, and the next thing I'm bloody activities manager at Curry Valley Resort with a master key, and a really good income, 60 and plus 60% of the horse ride income, and food, fuel, and accommodation at the resort as well. And like I had a better gig than the manager there, really, for a year and a half. It was incredible in 87 and 88. And my poor horses, and I built up a plant, which is the word for a sort of a bunch of horses, of 24 horses, there. And then Western Resort sold the resort to Accor Pacific, and they had a complete new management structure that came in, and they saw what sort of deal I had there. They tried to change it, and I said, no way. And they said, okay, you sack me, those horses. And I was getting a bit of the shits with it anyway by then, because I sort of had too many tourists that were really didn't want to go for a horse ride. They wanted to be photographed in the Karri Forest on a horseback, not being racist here, but a lot of Asian tourists, that have maybe seen Crocodile Dundee or whatever, and they want to come down here, and because this is in 87, 88, and
selfies.
And a lot of people would pay $200 for a family four to get on a horse, and then they'd take all photos, and then they'd say, that's enough, get off. They didn't want to go for an hour's walk through the bush, they just wanted to sit on a horseback, and then, because they were sort of, absolutely shitting themselves, and you can tell when a horse isn't comfortable with the person riding, sitting on his back, because the horse is thinking, what does this person want to fall off for, What does it want to run into a tree for? Why is it thinking these thoughts? Because I'm getting this really negative vibes, and I could see it in my horses, and especially Bonnie, she was a classic. She just dance around, I'm not taking this person. A lot of times I'd say, sorry, here's your money back. You really don't want to go for a ride, because you'll spoil it for the other people that want to have a decent time on horseback.
Mm.
So that was great, I love that, and I did it, but it didn't make any money at all. It helped with a little bit of fertiliser, like being a farmer lifestyle, and hay and extra food for the horse, and especially vet bills, especially when I was at Karri Valley, with 24 horses in sort of 2 paddocks. It was big management, husbandry issues, and had to get the vet down, and they all had to get a shot of selenium, for example, because they were all looking pretty bit poor, and the vet said, they're lacking in selenium, so because this area is low in selenium in the minerals in the ground, and so obviously the paddocks hadn't had it put in with their fertiliser regime or whatever. And bang, they come good, but after, a couple of grand from a visit from the vet or the farrier, as well,
Adds up.
20 horses, back then, it was $20 a horse, so it's still sort of $400, so that's a day's horse riding.
I think you're lucky.
But it was really good because, I was doing what I enjoyed doing, and I could sort of, not be an aggro boss, but you got to be a boss that sort of people feel confidence in, they're not, so you don't scare them sort of thing, but, But I was always told stories about, that hole there, that's where a tiger snake lives, and this lives there and that lives there, and I seen this going across the track the other day, and but you're safe with me, no worries, So it's part of an adventure, as part of it also a horse ride sort of thing, and that was good, and I enjoyed it, but as I said, it just got too much with people with unrealistic expectations, of getting on a horse, They sort of wanted to get on a horse, put in a 20-cent piece, and sort of get rocked around a bit, and not actually have to assume control.
It's a pretty big thing. Yeah, even I was scared of horses as a young one.
Well, that's right. Yeah. Well, if you're prepared and you're confident of assuming control, you see a horse relax so much. It just sort of I've had people come to my place, and because when the Gracetown collapse happened, that was the end of my business and all sort of those businesses, because no insurance companies wanted to have a barrier. And,
Still expensive
and
now.
you had to have 25 million public liability to be able to ride in state forests, and it was, I think it went from about $1,000 or $900 to 13 grand insurance in 1 year after the Gracetown. So
Yeah.
and I told every punter that rang up, I said, look, I've got, no worries, I've got no insurance, and probably 50-50, maybe a bit more negative. They said, oh, okay, no worries, see you later. And the other, 40-30%, you just said, pig's ass, no worries, I bloody lived on a station all my life with my kids, we want to see a bit of the Karri Forest on horseback, so we're comfortable on horsebacks, and okay, no worries, and I'd still make people get on the horse in the round yard and, do a few laps and
Just to make sure.
Turn around and see if they're comfortable, and also see if the horse is comfortable, because if the horse is uncomfortable, it's going to play up a bit, and then it's going to make it not such a good experience for all the punters that are on the ride, So you get that right, and then off you go, and the dog chases a kangaroo out of the bush, and you bloody, if they've got good riders and you want to run after it, no worries, I had such action rides sometimes,
The thing about Karri Valley, though, I think it used to be Chinese owned. Is that right? Maybe it is now.
Way after me, yep.
And it'd still be a variety of tourists from all over the world. So
Pat the animals, yep.
you're going to get all sorts through there.
Yep. But
and most of them
no horse rides anymore.
Probably city folk too.
No insurance for it, But like I remember one horse ride. It was early morning. It was, and the son could speak a little bit of English. His mother was complete German only sort of thing, Both really capable on a horse, No worries. I wanted to see the forest, And he was explaining, okay, no worries, 7:30 at my place. My place, we ride down the railway line and then to the forest park, ride over near Parksy's place and then come home along the edge of the river, right around to Middleton Road sort of thing, So those trails along the edge of the river, it's just a classic ride, Some really good bends on sand hills and stuff, on an old firebreak track, but really good riding country. And I used to ride it all the time, with all the horses I had. Anyway, this day, this German lady, Katarina or something, I'll never forget her name, she had Donna, which I usually always rode, but she had asked, she'd say, can I have that horse? And I thought, she must know what she's doing because, that's my horse and it's a really good horse. But, get on and see what it's like, And then a son, they're both really good. So I got on Harry, this big sort of draft horse looking thing, but he was sort of a bit of a big horse and a bit of a dominant in the pack. But also, I always used to lead the rides, so people used to go at the pace I went at.
Yep.
And so I used to measure their capabilities if they could gallop up a hill, or even gallop down a hill, but from walking, So I used to make a lot of people, we'll walk, walk, You can only trot up this hill. I'm not even going to canter up this hill because you'll let the horse go and it'll be a chaos, So anyway, these people were really good riders, and I was having a hoot on Harrigan, And I came around this left-hand bend and there's a top of a Mary just all over the track, just the white, the sand of the track sort of going underneath it. And I was sort of sitting right back on. I had a white T-shirt on and my moleskin jeans and my riding boots and, no helmet, of course, probably no Cobra. And I was pulling him up, and I thought he was going to stop, so I was right back, and then he stuck his head down and just went through it, And I just got dragged off, and I was and he just smashed, heaps of tops of, dead Mary branches. It was a classic. It would have been a classic movie. And anyway, I'm sort of excuse me, and I hear this, oh no, and then this Katarina, I will get your horse. on Donna, and Donna jumps over me, you know. She's cantering, you know, behind me sort of thing, you know, and I'm just sort of, oh.
I'll get the horse.
Yeah, you know. Oh, she sort of jumped over me on Donna, you know, because Harrigan sort of dropped a couple of branches as he went through it and knocked me off. And then the son pulls up, you know, and he pulls up and looks at me and he goes, oh my God, you know. He looks down, I look down, and it's red just all over my T-shirt here, and I've still got a big scar, you know, just a little tiny stick went through, you know, and just scratched me right down sort of thing. But it was only a little tiny stick, and it hit the rib cage, you know, and just went down.
Bit of blood.
Just a bit of blood, lots of blood, you know. Yeah, oh my God, no, it's all right, mate, no worries, you know. And then Katarina, bloody walks back, you know, leading Harrigan, you know.
Great.
Within a minute or two, you know, and when I get back on, you know, an adventure like that, and with really competent riders was always good, you know, but I've got some just absolute horror stories as well, you know.
Well, that one wasn't.
My whole insurance policy go in front of my face, but, you know, we survived, but still. And
nice one.
Yeah, lots of adventures on horseback since I've came here. And
I've got wiped out on the horses there was Trappers and Browns up at near Jandakot.
Yep.
In the 80s.
Jibber Lake, yep.
And yes, got
Ian Trapper, yep.
one of those.
A good horse is a lazy horse is a hungry horse, he used to say.
Right. And
he used to only feed them when they
gallop,
got back.
but then if there was a tree with a little branch coming off it, I'd have to be like right down on the side. I think it tried to deliberately take me out.
Oh, okay. Oh, fair enough. Yeah, well, maybe, but usually, you know, horses are really they're not antagonistic animals. Like, there's no way a horse will run at you if you're standing in a paddock and it'll run over you. Even a stallion.
They won't step on you either.
That's right, because they don't want to lose balance, you know. They don't want to lose control of their movement sort of thing, so they'll go all around you all the time. And even if you just put your hands up, you know, usually 90% of horses will stop and freak out. And
Camels a little bit different. I did get to pat a camel in Middle Swan, somewhere around there. Was a menagerie thing. There's this camel in the paddock, and I said to the owner, "Can I pat the camel?" Yeah, sure. And he had a cone, a traffic cone, and a big Pilates ball that he would play with. So I went up to it, and they're huge. And it's got a saddle of curly hair and then sort of smooth hair underneath. And
Yep.
patted it, and he seemed to like that. And I thought, well, that's great. You can pat a camel. And as I walked back towards the fence, I turned around, and it was charging me. Charged straight at me, full on, got to me, and then nuzzled up and said, "Yeah, more patting."
Oh, so I didn't have a whole head stall on. I didn't have a saddle on it. Okay,
Yeah.
Wow, that's good.
But charged at me, and I thought this was we're on here.
Yeah.
And then, but no, just like dogs
Unreal.
will sometimes do.
Yeah.
More pats.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, yeah. But well, you know, anything bigger than you can be intimidating for sure. But you know,
I'm not small, but this thing was large.
Yeah, I was cantering along a track one day on clay and leading Bonnie, BB and Dolly, so 3 mares on my hand, you know, and with halters, just cantering along this beautiful sand track, high tea tree on both sides sort of thing, and the track's about a dozer width wide sort of thing, you know. It's sort of up behind where Luke lives, sort of on Hog Road, which is now part of the Bibbulmun track, you know, which is a bummer because I can't ride on it anymore. And I opened my mouth when they were realigning the Bibbulmun track from the water points, and I said, "Oh, this is a good track," you know. And then they said, "Oh, thanks, Paulo. Pity you can't ride your horse on it anymore." But anyway, that was years ago. I was riding along in this morning, you know, it's this beautiful canter, and just suddenly out of the left, a kangaroo, you know, quite a big, you know, buck, just came out of the bush and hit Clay right in the neck, you know. It was just jumping and going across that track, just a 1 in a million time, and Clay just sort of just ran straight into the tea tree, you know, and I just sort of you know, threw away the 3 reins and sort of just, and he stopped because he was sort of in really heavy tea tree, and I was laughing my head off. Luckily, I wasn't hurt in any way, you know, and then the horses had all stopped. You know, the good horses is when you use them a lot, and they, get used to the routine, and they get treated good, or they don't get treated bad in any way, So it's a pleasure, Bonnie I had for 33 years, and I could walk out the back door and whistle Bonnie, and shout out, and she'd come running, and I could jump on her back and ride her all day, and she wouldn't say a word to me.
I think it was a couple of years back, maybe 1 or 2 years ago, where your dog and your horse had died on the same day or a day apart.
Yeah, that was Bonnie and Perla. Yeah, same day. Yeah. Well, I was going to put down Bonnie. I'd have walked out heaps of times with me. I put down a few horses in my time, and I just couldn't do it. But she was looking at me. She was so poor, and she was 34 years old or 30, pushing 35, and the vet said, she's had a good life, poor, just the organs are breaking down, you just got to get it put down, So I got a mate farmer to come around and do it, and it's a bummer day, As I walked out, there was a beautiful sunlight on the veranda, on the driveway, and the Perla was lying there like she always does, sort of thing, in the morning sun, and I went out with a rifle again, just in case, and waiting for the guy to come, and typical me, come on, you lazy bitch, Huh? She was already dead, so. So yeah, that was a hard day. Yeah, still in my diary. I think it's August.
You keep a diary?
Yeah. I kept a diary
every day or most days.
Well, if I sort
happen.
of go to Bali or I go to Perth for a meeting or Bunbury to a meeting or something for 2 or 3 days and stay overnight and I miss a day, I keep a diary of what I've done here on the farm or, adventures I've had, or phone calls I've had or made or people that I've met and people that have rang me to ask for things, with regard to fire or council or whatever. And, since 1986, got a diary.
Getting back to Northcliffe, I'd like to get back to one of these traditional questions. Where do you think Northcliffe is going, for its future?
Good question, because it's really up to everyone in Northcliffe to decide that point, and it's up to everyone individually to decide every day how happy they're going to be that day. They don't have to really put up with stuff that makes them unhappy if they don't want to. But a lot of people subject themselves to terror or anguish every day or every week of their life, It's a real bummer that people do that, when it's pretty easy to put down the tools or walk away or ask for a different conversation, no worries, So you've got to, the hardest thing for me to learn how to do since retiring 4 years ago is to learn how to say no and not feel guilty about saying no to people who I've done little jobs for over the last 20 or 30 years, fixed their roof leak or the fence is broken or something. I just say, No, I'm on the pension now.
Fell off the step ladder on the milk crate the other day on a bit of a slopey bit doing the underside of my carport. Wrists are always... And people our age now aren't supposed to be going up on ladders much anymore.
Up to 60... The doctors warned me. He swore at me, Paul, up to 60, you go arse up, you go arse up a tit, or you fall up, whatever. After 60, you have a fall and you report it to your doctor. Really? Yeah. I said, oh, God, I've lost count of how many falls I've had since I was 60, mate, Stupidly, stepping out of the tractor or stepping down a ladder and thinking that the last step's the ground and then your foot goes through the last step and then you end up on the ground with a sore bum or whatever. In fact, I won't now go on the roof anymore to clean the gutters unless someone's at my place. I still do it, no worries, but I've just sort of, it's like horse riding now. The last time I was on a horse was 4 years ago and I know it's not the last time I was on a horse, but the last accident I had on a horse was about 4 years ago. And I came off with a person on the back with me as well, and I busted a couple of ribs, and it hurt so bad, for so long because I was so old, and my body takes more time to heal, I suppose, and it really knocked me back. And so that thought is in my mind when I yearn and desire to get on a horse's back again, I think, oh, if I fall off, I'm going to be in pain. And I transmit that thought to the horse, and therefore I don't have a comfortable ride, you know. So it's a mind game sort of thing that I've got to get over. And, you know, I'm confident in the horse I'd get on, but I've got to be confident in my thought pattern, you know. And when you get old and you hear stories of mates, you know, or mates' wives, or Willa's mother, you know, getting rid of a horse to one lady, and she just had ridden it every day and jumped on it the one morning to show this lady right around the yard like she did, and for some reason it spooked and she fell off and paralysed, you know, in a wheelchair for the rest of her life, you know.
Goodness.
At 61, I think, you know, and she's just really active lady, Sue, and just because of that thing. So that's thoughts in your mind as well, you know. When you've got that thought in your mind, it's think of something else or think of saying goodbye. I've spoken enough, haven't I? See you later.
Yes, mortality does get to creep in when you thoughts about it. Sorry, I think I distracted you then away from... Imagine, where do you think Northcliffe would be in 10 years? Maybe that's a better question. Like, not worrying about what everyone else is going to do to make Northcliffe a better place, but how do you...
Yeah.
Like, I've seen in the last 20 years almost nothing happen, you know. Kerry opened up and then she didn't. Hollybutt opens and closes. Bakery opens and closes.
Bannister Downs are still going good. They're still a big employer. And Marvellous Berries, they put a lot of money into town, so they're going to be around for a while. But, you know, they still got a lot of sort of issues facing them with, you know, natural resource as well as labour resource. And Northcliffe's always been impacted by the tyranny of distance, you know. And so people can grow stuff exactly the same as we can, but get it to market cheaper, you know, and faster, you know. So it doesn't need that cooling impact or, you know, preservation impact sort of thing, you know. But and I've always, you know, even when I was on council and people were saying, you know, oh, we live, you know, so far away from Perth, so we deserve more, you know. And I was always of the opinion that, you know, in fact, you should pay more to live away from all the bloody drongos in the city, you know, or you know. And
I live on a gravel road. I think it's a privilege to live on a gravel road.
Yeah, that's right. You expect, you know, to pay a little bit more for your privacy or whatever, you know. And so I don't think Northcliffe is, unless we sort of have a big cosmic event where Point d'Entrecasteaux and George always said that Point d'Entrecasteaux, Black Point, Fish Creek, there's 5 fingers to the Darling Scarp.
Yeah.
In fact, one Lewin as well, I think, at Augusta, you know, and there's these geological fingers sort of thing, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, geological activity is going to impact on nature or, you know, on natural resources, and also, you know, the oceans is a big thing, you know. The ocean temperature at the moment is a massive thing.
I think it might slightly warm. The oceans will slightly warm.
Yeah.
But I can't see anything big geologically happening in the area because it's quite stable. In fact, I think Northcliffe as a town is quite stable, consolidated. I don't see it growing much except for, you know, we always get new subdivisions and people moving in, but it doesn't seem to make much of a difference. The school is always struggling to get bloody students in there.
Well, but that's social divisions throughout the community, you know, even in the Perth and everywhere now, people are sort of wanting to homeschool their kids as well. But I think there's more people being attracted to the lifestyle of Northcliffe because, as my mum said, "What, Paul, what did you buy there for? It's the end of the earth."
Exactly.
And I said, "Wow, can I use that, Mum?" And that's right, you know, and it's so far away from anywhere, you know. If I want to go to Bali, I've got to drive for 4 hours to the airport and then only sit in a plane for bloody 3 hours, 15 minutes to get to, you know.
To get to a big city.
Right up to the other end of Australia. And But I don't. When you say growth, or what's going to happen in Northcliffe or any town in any community, it's mainly always relied on something that nature's provided or taken. And so, Carrollbarry struggled for a while, and then it got really famous because it got wiped out by Cyclone Saroja, and then it struggled again. And so suddenly people will realise, of the value of minerals, For example, the George Gardner rock collection
It's great.
is 20% rocks. It's only 20% rocks. 80% of that collection is minerals. And we don't realise ourselves the importance of minerals in our lives. And my brother-in-law, who's a retired, professor from university, like my sister, was always telling me when, you bloody hippies, Paul, you're chasing up the wrong tree, because what we're going to run out of is minerals. We've got the knowledge and the resources to keep powering and give us power for centuries, and we've got the resources to make water now, but we're going to run out of minerals. And we've got to be really careful of that. And so some, look at the periodic chart of elements, and suddenly you find a little something on your block that's suddenly worth more than ever Gina Reinhardt's made, and that'll change Northcliffe's outlook, won't it? But otherwise, I think Northcliffe's going to stay the same.
Okay. So actually, let me just say one last thing. Thanks so much for coming in today, Paul. I really appreciate you giving your time.
Good on you, Damon. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I hope we can do it again.